So I came to this country in 1999, came from South Africa, fully expecting to find a health service that would certainly be, as it professes to be, at the forefront of medicine in the world. That has not been my experience at all. Homeopathy is treated as though it's some kind of voodoo medicine. It's not recognized that it's available across Europe. It's certainly available in South Africa. It's not even worth talking about in South Africa. Boring. So you go to a homeopath. So what? Everybody goes to a homeopath. What's your problem? It's treated in a very, I think, ridiculous way. First of all, I think the basic principle of medicine has been forgotten, which is first do no harm. That doesn't seem to apply anymore. How I got into campaigning for homeopathy, which I think needs to be recognized that this is a basic human right to be able to choose what kind of treatment you have when you're ill, in line with those principles of the NHS Constitution. And secondly, not giving patients the right to choose is actually an infringement of the Equalities Act, which recognizes belief along with the other protected principles as one of the major principles of the Equality Act. Anyhow, how I got into campaigning. Round about 2010, I was reading a newspaper Saturday morning and saw an article about the Science and Technology Parliamentary Committee having an investigation into evidence for homeopathy. Because I'd used homeopathy for so many years, I was very intrigued. But when I read the article, it was so derogatory, it was so scathing, that I decided, obviously being very naive, that I would like to be involved in this inquiry. I wrote to them, I sent them an email, I didn't receive any response. I made several attempts and eventually was told that my evidence would not be required. I think it has become very well known that that particular inquiry resulted in a recommendation to the government, to the NHS, that homeopathy, because there is no science to it, should be withdrawn from the NHS. Fortunately, the new coalition government, when they issued their response, they dismissed the report. So officially, homeopathy should be available on the NHS. I still found, I live in Swindon, I still found that I couldn't access it. The Bristol Homeopathic Hospital is not many miles away, and people in Swindon prior to 2010 had been able to access the services there. But when I made inquiries, I was told it was no longer permissible. The PCT in Swindon had withdrawn the contract. There had been no consultation, which is actually against the principles. Patients had not been asked, consulted, redirected, anything like that. So this began what has now been a 5-year campaign, during which time I have made representations to the PCT. I joined the local involvement networking, which have subsequently been replaced by HealthWatch. I spoke constantly about the need for patient choice. Now, although I would choose to have homeopathy, I don't believe that other people might necessarily choose to have it. But the whole idea is that we have a right to choice. And in order to make that choice, we need to have information. There is a principle in the NHS which is actually taken from the result of the Nuremberg Code, that patients have to give informed consent. We cannot give that consent, which, as I say, is a legal obligation, without information, which is actually systematically withheld from patients. I have made so many representations to the Swindon PCT, subsequently to the Clinical Commissioning Group. I have, through various counsellors, been represented on the Health Oversee Committee. It has been taken to the Health and Wellbeing Board. As I say, for the past 5 years, I have been campaigning to establish patient choice, which is actually part of what the Constitution is all about. And I have to say, and I'm very sad to say this, it's been without success. The biggest problem is, and we talk about the last election having been won on a fear and smear campaign. And I think this is what's happened with homeopathy. It represents the biggest threat to the pharmaceutical industry, to the profits, to the long-term planning, to everything like that. If homeopathy came into practice as in this country as it should be, we would have drastically reduced bills. There was a study done recently in Holland where they found that where patients were given the choice of homeopathy and other complementary medicines, there was a saving of 10% on an annual basis. Now, if that was to happen in this country, where the budget for the NHS at the moment is 134 billion pounds, that is, I believe, 9 zeros, and we were to save 13 billion, that would mean that the proposed cuts of 12 billion pounds would not have to be taken from poor people. We could achieve it just by health savings. And I think this is something that, people are not being told. They're not being given this information. It is being withheld. I've asked for the information to be made available in GP surgeries. I've asked for it to be made available in schools and libraries, and all I get told all the time that there is no scientific evidence as per the 2010 Science and Technology Committee, but nobody adds that that report was actually dismissed by the government, but it has been extensively quoted in medical circles. The other thing that I would like to talk about is the recent, and it's about a week ago, we had a program on TV about the need to find new antibiotics because of the dangers that we now, as civilization, are facing because of the lack or the future lack of any antibiotics to fight like MRSA, something like that. I watched the program with a mixture, I would say, of amusement and anger, because whilst we have things like homeopathy, we wouldn't need this kind of intervention. We have no guarantee, notwithstanding that it's going to take many billions of pounds. Again, the figure to be given by the UK government is £2 billion, we have no proof at all that in 20 years' time we won't be faced with exactly the same situation, very difficult situation. And one of the items in the program was what I would have called was India bashing. The program seemed to be strongly slanted towards saying, well, it's all pretty much India's fault because you can go into a pharmacy there and pick up antibiotics over the counter, and it's their fault. Now, I would think, and again, this is a lack of information in the general public, that this is more than a little influenced because A, India produces a vast amount of generic medicine, which is not good for pharmaceutical business, and B, because there is so much evidence of how fantastic the results are for more than half the Indian population through using homeopathy. The research that has been done there, the results that are being obtained in India are quite outstanding. If we're going to talk about how India is influencing the rise of antibiotic resistance, why is there no balance? Why are we not getting the information from India as to how effective homeopathy is? So I rather suspected that the public is being primed to dismiss anything that comes from India. So if somebody comes along and talks about homeopathy, it will be, but we know them. They're the people who are contributing to the antimicrobial problem with antibiotics.